Hey all, today we are here to talk about how we migrated GoPay to a service mesh based architecture. Let's start with a little bit of introduction about ourselves. So, I am Mahindra and I have been at Gojek for more than 3.5 years now. Gojek was still a pretty small company when I joined, and I got this amazing opportunity to work during the hypergrowth years. Back when I joined, Gojek was a unicorn. Today, it is the first ever decacorn company in Indonesia. I have worked on multiple things over here, including setting up data lake, a few data science projects, and most recently on introducing a service mesh into our GoPay architecture.
Hey everyone, I am Shishir. I have been working at Gojek for around 4 or 5 years now. Till recently, I used to be in the GoPay team where Mahendra and I were co-workers. Before working in GoPay, I had worked on the ride-hailing products of Gojek.
Okay, let's talk a bit about Gojek for a minute so as to give you all a bit of context about the challenges that we face. So, Gojek is a super app in Southeast Asia. We do everything from ride hailing to food deliveries and a whole bunch of other utilitarian services. And tying all these services together is the payments arm of the company called GoPay. So last year at KubeCon Barcelona, our colleagues Akash and Abhishek, they spoke about how we migrated GoPay from virtual machines to Kubernetes. And this was the last slide of their talk, where they mentioned that the next steps for us was to move to a service mesh based architecture. And here we are today to talk about how we migrated GoPay to a service mesh. So let me give you a quick overview about what GoPay is and a little bit an idea about the scale at which we operate. So, GoPay is the leading digital payments provider in Indonesia. We have the largest monthly active users since the end of 2017. In 2019, we processed $7.8 billion worth of transactions. As of today, GoPay is accepted across 300,000 plus online and offline merchants as a payment method. We have integrations with 28 plus financial institutions, which includes all the major banks and other entities. We process more than 100 million transactions every month. And for Android users in Indonesia, GoPay is the first ever e-money payment option on Google Play Store. This was a bit about our business. Let's talk a bit about our scale from the technical point of view. So GoPay has a few hundred developers, and we have multiple Kubernetes clusters running various types of workloads. We have around 150 plus microservices, making more than 130 million internal API calls. Our developers do more than 100 developments every week, and our services communicate using REST as well as gRPC protocols. The primary languages that we use for writing our services are Golang, Java, Clojure, and Ruby.
So let's talk a bit about how our architecture was before we introduced the service mesh. So we had mentioned earlier that we use gRPC and REST for inter-service communication. We had to introduce service discovery and client-side load balancing for using gRPC till load balancing tool started supporting gRPC. Also, our migration to Kubernetes was not complete. So we would encounter applications where some workload was running on Kubernetes and some was on VM. So I'll explain a little bit more about how our service discovery mechanism works. We mostly still use console for service discovery, and every node deployed has a startup and shutdown hook, which would register the node onto console to or deregister the node out from console to enable service discovery. So any client calling a service would basically call console to look up the service registry and to get the nodes of a service and then make a call. So now this logic of periodically fetching nodes from console from a service registry was baked into client libraries. So for example, if service B is calling service A, the client library of service A would have this entire logic of service discovery and also load balancing baked into the client library. Um, so this way of doing service discovery made it easy for us to migrate workloads from VMs to Kubernetes, as workloads on pods could just register themselves on the service discovery on the service registries. So one issue with the setup is if for whatever reason, if a pod is not deregistered from the service registry in console after being either stopped or killed, it is still discoverable and hence might receive traffic. Another potential issue could be skewed distribution of traffic across nodes of an app, since distribution of traffic is a client-side concern. So as a way of working around this problem, we started using Envoy as a reverse proxy for our applications. And we used to call, or we still do call Envoy in this configuration as a fronting Envoy. So now Envoy was a good fit for us because it was one of the first out there to support gRPC, and the instrumentation is very comprehensive. So what would happen is here the XDS server for Envoy would look up the service registry for service A in console and fetch all the nodes of service A. And then once all the nodes are fetched, Envoy would then basically add these nodes of service A to its upstream cluster. And then let's say in this scenario, service B is dependent on service A. So now service B, instead of connecting to the nodes of service A directly, would then look up the console service registry for reverse proxies of service A and then forward requests to the reverse proxy of service A. And then service A's reverse proxy or fronting envoys would then in turn proxy these requests and also take care of distributing the load evenly. So over time, there was an issue with this setup where we had accrued quite some amount of tech debt. And one of those challenges was basically for every service that used gRPC, definitely, we would need a fronting Envoy setup to be deployed. Another challenge was that basically the Envoy versions drifted over time. So for example, we would have some versions of Envoy running version 1.6 while some were running version 1.12. So this also meant that it was becoming harder to update our XDS cluster, which fetches the nodes of a service from console, because changes in the Envoy config contract would make it that much more difficult to upgrade the XDS server. Also, this syncing mechanism between the XDS server and syncing nodes from console all the way to the upstream clusters in Envoy had an issue where we noticed a little bit of latency once in a while. Also, another thing that we had discussed earlier was there was a systemic issue. If a pod is not traffic, some service degradations and also a downtime in between because of this issue. So another overhead I sort of missed out on was basically if there's any patches or upgrades in our service in our client libraries that we had mentioned earlier, then that would need to be deployed across the fleet, and it is a very tedious work. And even if one patch somewhere gets missed out, it could lead to issues. So another issue with this entire setup, not really a problem as such, but basically a design drawback, was that we did not have a very nice system of doing canaries, because we did not have proper traffic splitting. So what we had in a canary setup was basically a pod that was designated as a canary, and then we used to deploy changes on this pod first, and then roll out the changes if they are fine to the rest of the nodes. And this is not an ideal way because the proportion of traffic being sent to the canary pod is dependent on the ratio of the replica sets. So that was another issue that we faced. And to add on top of this, we had a lot of business expansion plans also. So GoPay is definitely expanding to new countries, and we had a lot of requirements coming in. Now, different countries have their own data localization and processing requirements. And more often than not, this means that we would need to have a data center or a cloud provider in every region, in every country in some form. So most of the services and their fronting envoys have to be deployed across all of these regions. Certain services catering to regional needs need to be deployed in that particular region. But traffic will flow across regions and across data centers. So some things like automated certificate management, mutual TLS, defining ingress egress gateways and managing them, and defining firewall rules become a necessity and a first class problem to solve. We are also planning to introduce quotas for traffic across regions and try to do some rate limiting. So now, considering all these things, we decided that we thought that a service mesh is needed in our architecture because it addresses some problems and gives us a lot of good features and good tooling to work with. A service mesh can easily handle um, client side load balancing and service discovery and solve that entire problem for us. It would also help us with deprecating console for service discovery. Now, one issue that we have is basically um, with Kubernetes coming in, a lot of new applications are deployed on Kubernetes without actually uh, syncing with console. So that means now console is no longer the single source of truth for service registry or service discovery. Um, Service mesh obviously gives us better telemetry about what's going on in our between our services, and also provides better traffic splitting capabilities, which means that now we can build more sophisticated deployment strategies or better canary strategies using the traffic split capabilities. And it eliminates the issue of maintenance of different versions of Envoy in our architecture, because now that the Envoy is deployed as a sidecar, the management is easier than having to keep an inventory of envoys and manually checking if they are updated or not. And yeah, all these wonderful features of service mesh is also something that we needed. So these are all the reasons why we thought that a service mesh will solve our problems. So just before we move on to the next section, we just want to do a quick recap about what our issues were and why we decided a service mesh was best for us. So we had issues with client libraries and service discoveries, and the load balancing logic baked into the client libraries. And keeping the client libraries and the fronting envoys updated was a tedious task. And we faced issues because of version drift or because of other issues with envoys. And this setup needed to be replicated across regions, so which means there was that much more overhead of setting up of the infra, and so we wanted a minimalistic infra here. So now that we had made this decision, we were at this critical juncture where we wanted to decide what service mesh to use. There were many options available to us, and we had a lot of requirements from our or considerations from a service mesh that we needed to think about. And after thinking about this, we decided that Istio is the best fit for us. And there were a couple of factors that we will talk about right now which influenced this decision for us. One of those factors is we wanted a service mesh that uses Envoy as the data plane because of our prior experience and expertise in maintaining and debugging Envoy. We also had a couple of custom filters written on top of Envoy, which we would ideally want to avoid porting. And we didn't, of course, want to handle the control plane for the service mesh, since even when we made that decision, there were quite a few options available for us in the open source community. And yeah, I guess that's another reason why we chose Istio is back when we were making this decision, um, we had a lot of options available to us, but the sort of maturity and sort of rich feature set that we wanted primarily for policy related and rate limiting features from a service mesh that we wanted were best supported by Istio.
Alright, so now that we decided we want to introduce Istio, the next thing for us was to come up with a new architecture. One thing that we could have done is we could have taken a bit of downtime, introduced Istio, migrated all the services over there, and then we could have brought everything up. But downtime is something that we obviously cannot afford. It would have costed us millions of dollars. So we had to do it gradually, one step at a time, with zero downtime. That means that for a while, both the old architecture and the new one with the service mesh, it will have to coexist. So we decided on a certain set of requirements for introducing a service mesh. First of all, there should be seamless integration of services inside the mesh with the ones that are outside. So let's say we want to migrate service A to Istio. There may be a few other services calling the service A. Those services that are calling the service A, they should be able to do so seamlessly without making any changes on their side. That means that for a while, both uh, the old and the new, there needs to be seamless traffic flow. So we basically narrowed it down to three requirements for traffic flow. One thing is that the traffic should seamlessly flow within the service mesh, from inside the mesh to outside, and from outside world to inside the mesh. We also wanted to support staggered migration of services to Istio. So what this means is that initially we would shift a small percentage of traffic to the pods on Istio. Over time, we'll increase the traffic split and slowly strangulate all the pods that are not on Istio. Moving 100% of traffic at one shot, that could have caused a major downtime in case of unforeseen situations. We also wanted a robust rollback strategy in case something goes wrong. And to add on to that, we wanted to detect any possible performance issues with our current setup. So all in all, this means that ensuring a seamless integration was the key to our success. Now let's go through each of these scenarios about how the traffic would flow. Let's start with the first one within service mesh. This is the simplest case actually. So there are two services, service A, service B. Service A wants to talk to service B, and for service B, there are virtual services and destination rules configured, which has all the rules about where the traffic should go, how traffic splitting should occur, and things like that. And this information about the virtual service and destination rules of service B will already be present in the sidecars for service A because those sidecars are constantly talking to Istio control plane. So what this means is anytime service A wants to call service B, the sidecar of A, based on the rules that it has, will call the sidecars of service B. As simple as that. On the screen here, we have shown dotted arrows that connect service A pods to Kubernetes Service Discovery. This is just us trying to represent that this is how we are deprecating Consul for service discovery, and we are using Kubernetes Service Discovery in an indirect fashion via Istio. Moving on to the next case, from non-Istio environment to Istio environment. So let us say service A is in Istio and service B is still not migrated, and service B wants to call service A. So B is still using Consul Service Discovery, and we didn't want to make any changes on B's side. So what we did was on the Consul server, we added an entry for the ingress gateway for service A. So B would call Consul, it would get the details of the ingress gateway, and then it would make a call to the ingress gateway, which is inside Istio, and the ingress gateway will then redirect the traffic to the pods of service A. Third case where service A, which is inside Istio, needs to call some service that is outside of the mesh. So services that are outside of the mesh were still not using Kubernetes Service Discovery in a robust manner. So we still had a loop with the older system, which is Consul. So in case service B is outside, service A will call Consul Service Discovery. It will discover where the pods are, and then it will directly make a call to the pods of service B. Apart from these services, we also have a lot of stateful workloads which are on VMs, like say for example Kafka or or Postgres, Redis, RabbitMQ, etc., etc. So for all the stateful workloads, we have service entry inside Istio. These service entries are again synced into the sidecars of A through Istio control plane. So every time A has to call Kafka, through the service entry information that it has, it would make a direct call to Kafka VMs. So this is how the traffic would flow in all the three scenarios. So just to recap what we discussed, we chose Istio. We wanted seamless rollout and rollback and a staggered rollout option. Primarily had three cases to handle during rollout: within the mesh, from inside the mesh, and from outside the mesh. And we used existing service discovery wherever possible with Istio to make the rollout seamless.
Now we would like to cover some of the challenges we faced during the rollout. Now the requirements for the rollout made this exercise quite complex already, and we wanted to do this for all the services in our fleet. So we decided to eventually move to a model where service owners would be able to migrate their services with minimal support. We also decided to begin with a bare minimum service mesh with only traffic splitting capabilities. So this means we did not have circuit breaking retries, rate limiting, or quota management, or identity management and mutual TLS. So in the first phase of this rollout, we worked closely with the teams owning the first few applications that were selected for the rollout. So this ensured that we could also introduce Istio concepts to the devs and walk them through any changes in the infra or deployment processes. At this stage, we had something like an informal internal checklist for migration and deployment, and we used the initial rollouts to gather feedback about this checklist and to make it more comprehensive. In the next phase, we use this internal checklist to draft documentation and define the standard operating procedures for the migrations and the deployment processes. In this stage, the tech and infra automation for the Istio rollout was already quite stable, and we were testing to see if our documentation and our processes were robust. So we also actually handed over our documentation to developers and asked them if they could migrate their apps to Istio themselves. And but at this stage, we also had an understanding that we would be available for developers for any questions or for any support, as the documentation and processes were not completely tested yet. Now, moving on to the third phase of migration. This is the last phase, and here the documentation and the processes were also battle tested, and the migration was mostly running on autopilot. And we use the time freed up because of all the automation and documentation for enabling more features of Istio. Now, coming to the automation and documentation that we used, so we created Helm charts that supported Istio resources and automatic injection of Istio sidecars, etc. And we also added support for rolling back from the service mesh or rolling onto the service mesh into the Helm charts, and made it really easy for the developers to roll back or roll out as and when it was convenient or comfortable for them. In addition to this, we noticed a couple of points of friction and points of failures, and we identified and we wrote automation scripts for validating any sort of introduction of new resources, Istio resources into our CI pipelines. And I think this is a screenshot of the table of contents of our documentation that we created specifically for Istio, where we covered topics from the beginning and in increasing order of difficulty, so that people could gradually get themselves more comfortable with this.
Okay, so now that we had the Istio control plane and the data plane set up, we had to ensure that the monitoring and alerting is as robust. So internally, we have a Prometheus and Grafana based setup for monitoring and alerting that we use for a lot of things. So when we set up Istio, we ensured that all the metrics they go to the internal Prometheus that we have already set up. Uh, for storing the metrics for a long-term thing, we are using Cortex, and also for horizontal scalability of Prometheus. We created separate dashboards on Grafana for control plane as well as data plane. Uh, what kind of matrix we have on this dashboard, I'll just talk about it in the next slide. And these default dashboards, they were available. So the moment a service gets migrated to Istio, the matrix for that particular service starts coming onto those dashboards. Also, some default alerts were set up, which directly goes to the respective teams. And if the entire flow is present on Istio, if all the services in that one particular flow is on Istio, then there is an amazing service graph visualization which shows traffic flowing from service A to B to C and wherever else the traffic is going. It also shows the red, green, and yellow lines that shows service degradation or any error rate, or if service is all good. In that case, it's green. So, talking about some metrics that we have on our dashboard for the control plane, obviously one thing that we measured is the XGS latency. This ensured that the control plane and site and the data plane, like how much time it's taking for these two planes to sync, the error rate for XDS, resource usages for control plane pods, any certificate related errors, how many sidecars are out of sync with the control plane, sidecar version drift. So you can upgrade Istio control plane, but data plane can upgrade over time. So what we do is once we upgrade the control plane to a newer version of Istio, we leave it to the developers to update the data plane, and we keep a metric to check how many of those services are still not upgraded. So in case you have to send reminders to the respective teams. For the data plane, we use the four golden signals of monitoring: latency, traffic, errors, and saturation. These are all standard signals that are there. Some of the challenges that we faced. One thing was obviously getting the developers comfortable with the new environment and new concepts. So we held a whole bunch of internal workshops and sessions to talk about Istio, answer any questions that the developers would have. Uh, when rolling out Istio, we made one mistake, fortunately not on production, was that we installed Istio control plane using Helm. But then when we were making some configuration changes, we did it using Istio CTL. And this screwed up the control plane state. We weren't able to figure out what exactly was wrong. We reached out to the community. All the metrics and dashboard looked good, but things weren't working as expected. And eventually, someone from the community pointed out that you should either use Helm or Istio CTL for installing Istio. Don't mix and match the two things. Uh, Fortunately, Istio has deprecated support for Helm altogether in the newer version, so I don't think anyone else would face this error again. Also, understanding service entries. We found it a bit confusing initially, but thanks to the community, we now have a much clearer understanding of how service entries work. Using Helm to deploy, we were using Helm deploy a lot. Uh, Looking back, it would have been better to use Helm as a templating tool rather than using Tiller and using it to deploy our actual project. So just to recap about what we discussed so far, there were three phases of rollout. Improvements in each phase targeted towards empowering a self-service migration. We used staggered migration to discover any issues or limitations, created documentation and a guide for migration, and added automation for validations in CI pipelines. So the current state of migration is that we are in phase three. Migration and any new services that are coming on, developers just go deploy it on Istio on their own. And we have started adding more features like MTLS, rate limiting, multi-cluster control plane, etc., etc. None of this would have been possible without active support of the Istio community. They are the ones, and their active support is the reason why we are here today. And in particular, we would like to thank Neeraj and Sriram, without whose support our whole endeavor about migrating GoPay to Istio wouldn't have been successful. So with this, we would like to end this session and open the floor for Q&A. Thank you. Hello, shall we start with the Q&A? Hello.
I'm going to go
Yeah,
ahead and
it
start
seems
reading
like there's
some
some issue, but
questions
this
for
is
the audience to hear. Do you have metrics on how the service mesh impacted resource usage, performance, or latency?
Mahendra, you want to take that one?
Sorry, there was some connection issue. I wasn't able to hear it properly.
So the question
I'll try
was,
to
do you
repeat
have
the question, but
metrics on how the service mesh impacted resource usage, performance, and latency?
Okay. So in terms of latency, we didn't notice any significant increase in the overall latency. There was a slight increase, but that is something that we can live with. In terms of resources, there is one more container in the pod, so we obviously have to assign resources to that. But overall, because we were also using fronting Envoy, which were on VMs, it actually resulted in a reduction of resources for us. So it definitely is a win-win where we can move out from fronting Envoy and deprecate Consul and move all the configuration to the Istio sidecar.
Great, thank you. Another question is, how can you manage DMZ applications?
I did not hear that question. Sorry. How do you manage VMs?
How can you manage DMZ applications?
I'm not sure what DMZ applications are.
All right, we will
Yeah,
go to
same
the
here.
next question. Did you evaluate performance after enabling service mesh?
Yes, we did look at the performance, and we didn't see any significant degradation in the overall traffic. So it was all good.
Yeah. And in addition to this, we also had staggered rollout. So we actually had some portion of the workload running on the mesh and not on the mesh, and we could compare things side by side. And we did not notice anything significant. In some cases where there were issues that could be solved by increasing the resource limits on our pods.
Next question, was there any case of failure during the migration? If so, how did you handle it?
Yeah,
you
I
want to take
think
that?
we did face, yeah, sure. We did face failures. Fortunately, none of them because of Istio as such. It was more about issues because we were introducing a service mesh in our environment for the first time. So issues around mismatch of versions of gRPC and things like that. So because we had a rollback option, as soon as we saw some issue which could not be triaged quickly, we would roll back traffic from the service mesh onto the previous setup, and that duration before rolling back gave us an opportunity to collect enough data to learn more about it and fix it. So yeah, that's mostly how we deal with it.
Great, thanks. And then I think we have time for one more question. So when you installed the Istio on production, did you encounter with any traffic downtime?
No, not really. There wasn't any kind of downtime at all. The traffic was moving seamlessly because of what we just discussed in the talk.
Okay.
Yeah,
We do have time
one
for
thing
one
I'll
more.
add there is we were, sorry, just one bit I want to add there to that question is we were a little smart in introducing a service mesh in the sense that we had some asynchronous components running off our event sourcing architecture, which is where we introduced it first. So any sort of issue would not actually impact live traffic. And then we introduced it to our real-time components. So yeah, that's
Great.
it.
Thank you so much. So I think that's all the time we have for Q&A. We do want to offer that our presenters will be in the Slack channel on channel number 2, case studies. So please join us there to continue the conversation. Thank you to our presenters.